Ah, those polar bears. So good. Hello and welcome to day 4 of Young Writers Week. We're here to talk about a new-ish medium for storytelling, commercials, and advertising. Now, advertisements to a certain extent have been around for longer than capitalism. The way that they function now is made only possible by a mass media marketplace. The fact is, in the modern world, commercials and advertisements are almost inescapable. No matter where you look, you're going to see an advertisement somewhere. Unless, of course, you take a break from it all, go to a beach and not worry about whether or not you're saving 15% or more on car insurance. Wait, why am I thinking about... Oh, come on, Geico, I had one chance to take a break from this. As a form of mass media, advertisements are a great way to tell stories, but advertisers themselves tend to forget about this. There are countless commercials pushing products with sales, with buy one, get one, with no money down, 0% financing, what? And we tend to tune them out because we're extremely uninterested in anything they're trying to sell us, because most educated people realize that they wouldn't be spending money to tell us a thing unless they expected to make money from us buying that thing. And so with this in mind, even when advertisements do tell us a story, that story always has an ulterior motive to sell us something, to make us think about something in a positive light, whether it's to establish loyalty to a brand or loyalty to a product. And so advertisers use stories to sell products because facts, figures, and data don't change a lot of people's minds about something, but stories and feelings and connections to a character can make you view a product or company more positively. Now, when I talk about storytelling in advertisements, there's two things that I'm referring to. First, companies develop characteristics for their brand, which is usually reflected in the way they advertise and the things that they say about themselves and about their products. This is functionally similar to the way writers create characters for their stories. Brands have an identity, they represent beliefs, they stand for something, and they have a particular way of speaking to others. And these brands are given characteristics designed to appeal to the particular audience they're meant to be sold to. Because rather than using numbers and figures, it's much easier to use a tagline or a story in order to tell people why your product is superior. For example, water. You need it to survive. Now that advertisement, though factually accurate, isn't going to appeal to anyone because everyone has a preconceived notion of why water is important and how important they think water is. Compare it to water, the one constant in your life. Now that was a bit of a ridiculous example, but when you actually look at advertisements, they operate under a very similar principle. Even bottled water is often associated with things like purity or naturality or being part of a natural world that you become a part of when you drink water. And that's because explaining why your water is better than another person's water is an almost insurmountable task because it's hard to measure which water is better than another water. Instead, companies who sell water talk about how their brand represents cleanliness or the idea of good things. And that way, later on, when you're at the store thinking of picking up bottled water, maybe you're more likely to pick up the brand that's associated with being clean and fresh, rather than the brand that's associated with being not that. I would hate to be the brand of water associated with not being clean, like... I'm not sure how Nestle survives. Now, the second way that advertisements tell stories is obviously in the ads themselves. That's why you see commercials like Coca-Cola's Polar Bear commercials. It's a very simple story, but it's one that basically everyone can relate to, and seeing it associated with Coca-Cola gives us more positive opinions of the company itself. It reminds us that, like, Coca-Cola, you guys are pretty cool. Other than all the stuff you do that's not cool. But in this moment, I think you're cool. And as I mentioned before, telling stories through advertisements is a better way to create an emotional connection between you and the person you want to buy your thing. Because it's the goal of every advertisement to hook the audience into listening to the company tell them a thing. And the best way to catch people's attention is with an interesting story. People like stories. It's our favorite thing. In either case, advertisements are something that we're all familiar to, so let's get into the limitations of the media. So first, even when advertisements are telling a story, it's always in order to push a product or a company's image. And this means that the central question that any advertisement has to answer is, how is this going to positively affect our brand? That being said, there's no product that can't have stories told that positively affect them. There are extraordinary compelling ads about toilet paper that make you more invested about one toilet paper over another one, whether you like the one with the dog or the one about forgetting about it. There's a story behind that. They've told you a story and got you invested in a particular idea about their product. And so the fact that your stories are selling a product is more of an ulterior convention rather than something that stops you from ever doing something. The second limitation is that truth in advertising laws are a little bit super important. Your story can't be a complete work of fiction unless you're extremely careful about the way that you talk about the product that you're advertising. The way that companies are allowed to talk about their products, about other products, and about the way that their company does business is severely severely regulated by these laws. And so whenever you're telling a story, you have to be careful you're not crossing the line into misrepresenting the thing that you're trying to sell, because that will give you a whole bunch of legal trouble. The third and most extreme limitation is that nobody cares about your ad. The moment people realize you're trying to sell them something or what it is you're trying to sell, they are immediately going to tune you out. And the problem is, at some point in your advertisement, you have to try and sell them something. You have to try and push something onto the audience. And so timing when to do this and how to do this is an essential question in advertisement, because if you do it too early, you turn the audience off of your advertisement. If you do it too late or too subtly, the audience doesn't understand what you were trying to sell them. So even if you said a good story, if they don't actually know what it was about or what the purpose of it all was, you kind of haven't accomplished your main goal. And so knowing when and how to integrate your selling point is a central issue that you have to address when you're developing your advertisements. However, in comparison to this, the first advantage is that ads are everywhere. People are accustomed to advertisements. They've accepted the idea that advertisements will interrupt their shows 6 times an hour, that before every YouTube video, they might have to endure 5 to 15 seconds of watching someone trying to sell you something. This means that you have an extraordinary potential reach for anything you try to do advertising-wise. If you tell a good, compelling story, not only will you reach people who hear about it and want to experience what it is you were trying to tell them, or see this good ad, or have it shared with their friends, it will also be inflicted on a whole bunch of people who weren't looking for your story to begin with. And so the potential audience for a good story told through advertisements is literally every person with access to the internet, pretty much regardless of their personal tastes or preferences. This makes it really easy to reach your intended audience. Second, companies and even advertising experts don't really know what makes specific advertisements effective. Sometimes they don't even know whether or not an advertisement is effective. So in the abstract sense, you have an extraordinary amount of freedom about how you choose to market a product, except for the fact that you also kind of have to deal with boards and people who have image productions and brand loyalty. It can be a mess. But in a nutshell, it's not like there are very strict limitations about how you have to go about selling a thing, because there are as many potentially good pitches as there are potential customers. Now finally, how to get into the advertising business. Well, luckily/unluckily for you, basically everyone has to use these abilities at some point in their life. We sell our own personal brands constantly, whether it's through job applications or first dates or meeting your boss's bosses. You need to know how to talk about yourself and how to present yourself in a positive light. This is a life skill that can't be underestimated. And so learning about branding and communication and how audiences react to being told things can help you understand how to address bragging to people, essentially, because people don't like hearing people brag about themselves the same way they don't like hearing about companies talk about how great they are. We don't believe you. This is even more true if you're a writer. Writers rely extensively on their personal brand in order to gain and maintain an audience. So if you ever successfully write something you feel is worth sharing, you will then reach a point where now you have to think about how you're going to sell it to people in order to make them watch it. And yes, you are selling it even if you are freely distributed, because people would still have to invest their time and attention in watching or reading your thing. Now, being paid to be a professional advertiser isn't exactly the hardest thing to break into. Companies have marketing teams. Advertisements are constantly being made, and there's always a desire for new and exciting ways to sell products to people. And so if you have a passion for the medium, breaking into it is not all that difficult, though excelling at it is a bit of a different story. You just have to make sure you have the proper education and a good fundamental understanding of the medium, and then to simply work at getting hired into marketing fields. Though you'll by no means start by writing and directing advertisements on your own, there are a lot of opportunities to reach that point. After all, commercials and advertisements aren't going anywhere anytime soon, so we might as well make them more interesting to watch in the meantime. So that's all for this episode of Young Writers Vlog, talking about commercials and advertisements. This is your fourth and second last reminder about the Ask an Expert event happening this Saturday between noon and 4 p.m. Today I'll be introducing the panelist Bernesh Berhe. Bernesh Berhe is a graphic designer and freelance writer from Edmonton. She's written for View Weekly, Afropunk, and Vancouver Weekly, and started the print online magazine Marker, which ran for 3 years. So if you have any questions for her, make sure to join us Saturday between noon and 4 p.m. And make sure to join me tomorrow for my talk about the final of non-standard storytelling mediums, stand-up comedy. Till then, have a good rest of the night and keep on writing. People like stories. It's our favorite thing. Like, everything we do is either telling a story or creating a story. Even if that story is modern economics, string theory, computer science. That's a little... Mathematics is also a story, but kind of a really technical one. Like reading an encyclopedia. It's really hard to appreciate character development in an encyclopedia.